Welcome to Implicating the Real. Today's show is part 2 of the conversation began in the previous episode. Let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy.
I just had this one quote. It's talking about your personality. It continues to grow and develop, but its growth and development are highly dependent upon its realization that while it is distinct and individual, it is also but one manifestation of the soul. To the extent that it realizes this, it learns to unfold in creativity and to use those abilities that lie inherent within it. A lot of this is like repeating himself, but he's just kind of saying like, this is how we unfold in creativity. Like, it's important that our beliefs reflect a true picture of the structure of the self, and that allows us the ability to just grow in the proper way. Next page. Your soul, therefore, possesses the wisdom, information, and knowledge that is part of the experience of all these other personalities, and you have within yourselves access to this information, but only if you realize the true nature of your reality. Kind of saying the same thing. He's saying all these other personalities. I think he's referencing what we would think of as our reincarnational selves. So that's kind of the premise of Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Right, yeah.
Just kind of like leveling up to this realization that there's all these other probabilities and you can actually access these other abilities.
I had this one that I thought was like a really interesting turn of phrase. He says, basically speaking, consciousness can never be a closed system, and all barriers of such a nature are an illusion. Therefore, the soul itself is not a closed system. When you consider the soul, however, you usually think of it in such a light, unchanging, a psychic or spiritual citadel. But citadels not only keep out invaders, they also prevent expansion and development. And I just had written down that this feels like a little bit of projection coming out of Jane, you know? This whole like metaphor of like a citadel that has to keep out invaders. It's like, I've never thought of a soul that way. And I don't know if a lot of people think of their soul that way.
It's interesting too, though, in the context of Seth talking about that psychic warp, that window that Jane apparently leaves open that most of us don't.
Yeah.
Like, it's, in that sense, we're more of the citadel than she is.
Well, but it shows that that's like how she's thinking about these things, you know?
I think that's like speaking to like the psychology we've been talking about with her, like being anxious about the session and etc.
Well, not even that, but like maybe just like her background of like where she comes from. And like why a lot of the stuff seems to be targeted at sort of that like Christian, you need to keep your soul safe from evil sort of like way of looking at things. You know, like
I feel like back then there were a greater percentage of people who were Christian. And I think there is the underlying concern of how many of our readers are going to think that I am an invading demon taking over your soul. So you know,
you're true.
Bring down your citadel, please.
Yeah, bring down the citadel. Let me in.
Yeah. But I mean, Catholicism does say that a lot, like Satan is whispering in your ear.
Yeah. That's true, yeah.
In the end of this chapter, he's kind of pointing to like fear as the thing that we need to overcome.
Right.
Because that does allow us to open up to new experience. And like that makes sense to me. Like fear would be preventing us from expanding our ideas, our just realm of experience.
And I think you're right that does speak to like the audience that's contemporary with the book, is that like you have people who have this very like fear-based like anxiety relating to like their idea of what a soul is, you know?
Right.
Yeah, here on page 83, you worry for your physical identity and limit the extent of your perceptions for fear you cannot handle more and retain your selfhood. So that's like a big fear, is like our self is going to be overwhelmed because we have this narrow band of experience that we define that we take as part of our own identity. And if there's too much of something else coming in, we're like, it feels like we're going to get washed away almost.
Yeah, I feel like this is just part of like the problem I had with this chapter, where there's all these statements that are like, you do this, you think this, you think this. And I just kept being like, I don't, man. It sounds like you do. Like, you're the one who keeps saying it.
You're living in a post-Seth world.
I guess, man.
Post-Seth culture.
Also, yeah, there was the thing of like the intuitive knowledge. What was it? I think you already read it, but it was like, you can intuitively discover the nature of the solar entity. And in many ways, intuitive knowledge is superior than any other kind, which to me is just like, that's warning bells of like, that's what you say when you're bullshitting someone, is like, the best way to experience this thing is to try really hard to believe it, and then you will believe it because you tried really hard to, and intuitively you'll just know it's true. It's like, cool, thanks, man.
This is one of those things where I feel like it's got to be experienced, you know, like you have to, like, to me, I go back to my decision to like play with Seth's idea of spontaneity. And the way I understand that is that you kind of just let go of your idea of the way things should unfold to get what you want. And you just follow your intuition. You just go somewhere, you just do something. You kind of like, you just find yourself doing your normal thing. And then you're like inspired to take a different random route, and you go. Something happens that you're like, whoa, this wouldn't have happened had I not done this. And I really value this. And like, it's one of those sorts of experiences that like reinforces this idea. So like, I wouldn't take this on face value either, but like, it's something to like, I wouldn't throw it away.
But it says like, one prerequisite of such intuitive understanding is the desire to achieve it, right?
Right.
It's not like just intuitively understanding just anything that comes to you. It's like you're coming to it with a desire already.
Well, you have a desire. I'm presuming I have a desire to like understand what reality is on a more primary level. Like
Right.
You have this. This is a prerequisite. Like we probably wouldn't be having a podcast of this nature if that wasn't something you brought to the table or you didn't already have. Does that make sense?
I guess.
Like you're not going to have this experience probably unless you have enough desire to like push yourself in that direction. I mean, that's kind of part of what we're doing here, was like the soul is apparently like setting up the world and the player that's in the world, and there has to be an interaction between the two. So it's not just about like creating the events and they're just falling into your lap. It's also creating the self that's interacting within the world in a willful way that's going for what it's wanting. Because it's like, that's the beauty of experience, is that you're acting, you're interacting, you're achieving, you're developing, you're learning. That's where we get all our value from.
But my problem with it is it's not open-ended. It's like closed, where it's like,
In what sense?
well, it says that the prerequisite for the intuitive understanding is the desire to achieve it. It's like you have your goal in mind already, as opposed to you are open to whatever ends up being true. You know, it's like,
I think it's the same thing. The way I interpret it is he's saying that you can't go into it with an absolutely closed mind. Like I keep thinking of the example of, I'm not really a sports person.
yeah,
Baseball. You can read all you want. You can read every book about baseball there is. If you never actually play it once, like with your friends, a bunch of amateurs, you're never going to experience what it really is to play this. Like you're not going to have this understanding from the books or from listening to coaches talk about it or watching it on TV. You have to play it, and then that's my interpretation of his intuitive understanding. Like you have this feeling when you play baseball that can't be put into words and can't be given to you in any other form.
right. That makes sense.
But like if you take a kid like me, I like sports growing up, you take a kid like me and make her play baseball, kicking and screaming, I have no desire to play it. I'm never going to love it. I'm never going to know what people see in this sport if I don't have the desire to be like, oh, okay, you know what? This might be fun. Maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe it won't hurt.
I feel like that does happen though. You know, like if you bring somebody kicking and screaming into something and then they experience it and they go, oh, actually, that wasn't so bad. You know, like I recently played cricket for the first time, right? And I was a baseball person growing up, but I was like, I don't know how this is going to be. Like I sort of expected to not like it a lot. I expected that it would be like fine. But then when I started playing it, I had like the physical sensation of playing and being like, this reminds me so much of being a young boy playing baseball. This is great. I love cricket. And it's like, I didn't know ahead of time that I would find a love for the game. It's only by experiencing it without any sort of assumption of what my experience was going to be and being completely open to whatever it was going to be that I was able to find that, right?
Well, I think it's important to remember, like, he is specifically talking about such an intuitive understanding. Like, he just got done. It is what I read earlier, but like, he's pointing out that like, it's not as simple as just giving definitions here.
Yeah.
And when we think of our five senses as the only avenues for like any information, he's trying to cut against that. Like, so if you, let's say like we have like infinite perception. We're shutting off all the lights except for the 5 physical senses. And he's trying to like point us that like there's actually other ways of receiving information. The prerequisite for us to break out of our belief that we're only getting information through these ways is to have a level of desire that breaks through that like rigid belief system, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, we can argue whether or not we
I guess
think that intuitive information is a valid way of information or if it even exists outside of like materialism. Like a lot of people won't believe that, but I happen to believe, I don't believe the materialist viewpoint of the world. And so like intuitive knowledge, I'm believing there's levels to the self, or there's like, there's something I don't know and I have some access to it.
This reminds me of that book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. He's like this. Now he works as a security consultant for like huge corporations and royalty in different countries. And he wrote this book about a lot of women recommend it to each other, like as a way to stay safe. Like if your gut is telling you there's something wrong about a situation, just get out of there. And he says there's validity to this, but he approaches the book from like a completely scientific, non-spiritual, no boo perspective, where he's saying that when you think there's something wrong, it is part of your 5 senses. You're just not aware of it. But your mind is saying like, why did he like lead me into his house and then close his window? It's hot in here. Why did he close his window? It's like, it's physical perception like that, but something to you subconsciously does not make sense. And that's what he's saying. That's where the real gut feeling comes from. That your mind, there's just things that are happening that aren't relating to his whole story. And these red flags. It's not like a boo-boo thing. It is your 5 senses, and he calls that intuition, gut feeling, stuff like that. So like I really wish that Seth just defined intuition here.
For sure.
Because if he just means subconscious, then fine. It can fit into the material STEM view of like 5 senses or physical senses that we don't.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I think the sentence a little bit before that kind of gets into it, but like I'll read it again. You see it as not a simple matter of giving you a definition of a soul or entity, for even to have a glimpse in logical terms, you would have to understand it in spiritual, psychic, and electromagnetic terms, and understand the basic nature of consciousness and action as well.
Right. I didn't want to quibble on that one, but that was one that I was sort of like a little bit like, I don't know, on. Because it's like, I can understand, right? Like we have our mic set up and we have all the wires plugged in, right? And we like understand how to put it together. But it's like, if I quizzed you about like all the electromagnetic stuff that's going on with the mic setup, you wouldn't necessarily know all that. But you're still able to logically figure out problems with the setup without knowing all that, right?
Right. We can still function, but like, this is all in the context of trying to understand reality. And so even in that context, we could have a functional understanding of the wires, but if we want to understand the deeper reality, we do have to dig into that sort of understanding. Don't you think?
I mean, maybe a different metaphor might be helpful. I don't know if maybe this is like digging too deep into it, but it's like if I asked you like, I want to understand sort of the flow of people through the city that we live in. And then I was like, hey, I made this map of like the major roads that go through the city. And you were like, well, that's fine, but you're not really understanding, the nature of the asphalt and the gravel and stuff. And it's like, okay, well, like I still understand how people move through the city, right?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like coming up with analogies might be getting a little bit into straw man territory.
Sure.
But I mean, because he's talking about spiritual, psychic, and electromagnetic terms. Like these are things our culture values, like those domains.
Well, and they also value souls, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's interesting to me that this is a chapter that we're finding so many quibbles with, but I love it.
I think I might have just been in a bad mood yesterday. I don't know. I was reading it and I was just like, dang it, Seth.
I mean, he is just going to like hammer same ideas. So like if it's starting to, I mean, I think it's good that you're expressing it because otherwise it would just be like resentment building up.
Right. I did like the idea of the meditation that like it helps when there's like a thing you can do, and then be like, is this thing gonna work?
Yeah. And the earlier exercise, the one about imagine yourself on a stage underneath the spotlight and then turning the light off, and then where did it go from there? Both I found kind of fun to play with, and like
the stage one was hard to do for me.
Yeah. But I
It is.
think they both brought me to like headspaces there. It's pretty novel, I thought.
Yeah.
He calls that in Rick Stack's community, they call that side time, the stage exercise.
Oh, that's
So yeah, so sometimes when he talks to Jane and Rob about psychological dash time, he means like that kind of exercise where you're trying to basically feel your inner senses.
yeah. I think I don't know if it was on mic, but I tried to define side time to you once, and I feel like Seth never like
Never.
just said this is exactly what it is. But
Yeah.
my idea was always that like you basically lay down and just pay attention, close your eyes, pay attention to what you perceive. It's kind of almost like carrying your awareness into a dream almost.
Hmm.
Yeah. It seems like sort of like really intentional, sort of like daydreaming.
But that exercise specifically reminds me of the memory castle thing,
Oh, yeah.
where you're just using this like imaginary like structure to just enter into that space, that psychological space.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know about the dream castle?
I do,
Yeah.
for memorizing stuff.
Yeah. I think we talked about that on mic.
We did, yeah.
Yeah. This was just a little thing that he slipped in a little bit more of a definition of what the inner self is. So here we're talking about the soul and entity, which isn't exactly the inner self that we've been talking about earlier, or we've been talking about the inner ego.
Mhm.
The inner self knows its relationship with the soul. It is a portion of the self that acts, as you might say, as a messenger between the soul and the present personality. So in his definition or hierarchy of the self, there's the outer ego and there's the inner ego or the inner self. I think those are interchangeable. And then the soul or entity.
That was really interesting because I mentioned I had like looked up some like ethnographic like information about like, because I was trying to investigate this idea of there's this assumed idea of this is what you think a soul is, that like I think we've talked in a decent amount about like this is probably true to the American audience that, you know, Jane is writing a book for. But then there's these other cultures, other places in the world that presumably have the influence of being physically instantiated in the world, but have different views on what souls are. And I found one that was really interesting because it reminded me a lot of this passage.
Really?
Where there's the idea of the body soul and like the like outer soul or like large soul.
Huh.
Where it's like you have a soul that sort of like inhabits you and like does all the like normal life experience soul things. And it's sort of like made in the like shape of like you as a human being. But then there's this larger soul that is you're also attached to. And it's like I only read a small excerpt from it, but it seems like it has that sort of connection thing where like the larger soul speaks to the like body soul.
So the body soul will be akin to the outer ego and
Right.
the larger to the inner soul. Or
Yeah.
inner self.
It was like very cool that there seemed to be like a cool resonance there to me.
I find that so interesting because later in the dreams course, and just in the various books he's written about dreams and projection, Seth says that we astral project every night. So like what we are leave our bodies. But he did mention that like something called a body consciousness stays behind to make sure like everything over here is still good. Like,
Right.
you know, like if you're
That's why we're not dead when we astrally project or
right.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, or like you can still turn over or like take off your blankets if you're too hot, like while the real you is off doing adventures.
Right.
I think he talks about that too, because I think it's normal when anyone is presenting this sort of information to someone that has physical experiences and our traumas and fears related to death. I think Seth is talking about the cat playing with a mouse, like, and they're like, I think it must be Jane or Rob. They're just kind of like horrified for the mouse. You know, like the mouse isn't dead, but the cat's playing with it and it's going to kill it. And he talks about that first level of consciousness leaves, and it's just the cellular body consciousness that we're actually witnessing, and we think it's suffering, but that level of consciousness actually just he says elsewhere, maybe not there specifically, but it's exuberant in any sort of experience at all. It just wants to experience. So the part that would suffer there actually leaves when there's like a threshold of trauma, or it just knows that's the end.
And there's a lot of near-death experiencers who will say basically that, where like right before the incident that caused them to flatline, like for example, like a truck T-boning in the car, they pop out and they are viewing it from third person, but they see themselves in the car like lift their arms up to like shield their head. So they're out here looking, but something in there is still controlling their body, like, the reflexes.
Right.
But they don't feel the pain. Like it's like this dissociation where they're not suffering, and really the most pain they felt the whole experience of dying was when they like woke up
Yeah.
in the hospital like 3 weeks later, and then they had to feel
It
their
makes-
body completely broken.
It makes me think like we've been talking about like video games and horror movies, but like let's say you're playing a video game and there's this terrifying moment, you just drop the controller.
Yeah.
And like, not to say that your character would or wouldn't react. I guess it's possible that it would, or there's like some
It can keep
automatic.
moving, yeah.
But you can see how like just that conscious disconnection, there's a clear distinction between the part that can suffer and the part that's just like pixels on a screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think people talk about a lot of prey animals having a very like deep instinct for this too, right? Like I think like rabbits do it, where like if you like trap a rabbit, it like goes limp and just like becomes very docile because it has that like inborn thing of like, oh, I'm just gonna get eaten. Like it stops fighting.
I think it just has like a hair trigger with like that sort of separation. So
A hair trigger.
yeah, no pun intended. Makes me think of the fainting goats.
Yeah, the same thing with the fainting goats, right? Where it's like, and like the evolutionary explanation is like it's better for like the herd if one of these animals like just flops over and is like, I guess eat me and don't eat anything else.
Gives the predator a snack so the rest of them get away.
Right, yeah.
Interesting. Got any particular quotes, Anna, that you wanted to get to?
I don't know where this is in the book, but at some point in the chapter near the end, he says, he talks about how like the soul is not this closed system. It's really similar to what we were talking about before, where like no systems are truly ever closed,
Right.
and there are no true boundaries. And it just reminded me of how all I could think of, maybe because of my medical background, was how we define ourselves as our bodies. Like, you're a human, I am like one discrete organism of a human.
Right.
But really, if you look deeper, like you have more numbers, like you have a greater population of bacteria in your gut than the cells that are you,
Right.
that have your DNA total. And like you would not fare well if you didn't have that gut flora in you. Like if you took enough antibiotics to wipe out all the gut, all the bacteria that live in your gut, you would probably die. And because they're responsible for like a lot of nutrition, processing things.
Right.
So it's funny because like you see yourself as this one organism, but like if you were to zoom in, you've got all these different species of bacteria living on you. You have like mites on your skin or on your eyelashes, and it's like, okay, where is the real Joe, and like where is everything else? Because if you take all that out, you'll just die. And then like if you go even deeper, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Right.
But like they say that mitochondria were single-celled organisms before, and at some point they moved into cells and like had
And
a symbiotic relationship, right? But like now they're considered non-living, but they're still part of. We need those.
Right.
Very obviously die without them, but like where was the separation between human and that single-celled organism, like that species? It's like really truly no boundaries, even like if you look at things from a physical perspective.
Yeah.
I like that we're obviously challenged by him introducing this theory of the self, that it's complicated. There's no real boundaries, and we don't know where the actual identity is, and there's all these sub-identities and consciousnesses, but like he turns that challenge back on us and like points to like things that we do know and accept, but kind of like accept in like a siloed way. Like we have that understanding in like nutrition or biology or something, but like when it comes to like understanding psychologically what a human is or what an identity is, we don't factor all those things in and let that information like challenge our ideas of what we had before.
Well, the thing that's troubling for me, because like I feel like what you just described seems very like plausible and like maybe not commonsensical. Like I don't know if everyone would normally think about it that way, but once you have it explained that way, like I think you can adjust to just kind of seeing things that way, you know? Like I think a lot of people who believe in sort of like the Gaia hypothesis have like a very easy time being like, oh, well, I'm on this level, sort of in a living environment for other things, just like the world is a living being that is an environment for me to live on. And in some ways I'm a part of it, and in some ways I'm separate from it. But that's just kind of how living things work, is we're these non-closed systems. The problem I find is less accepting the non-closed nature of the systems and is more in squaring that nature of things with the idea of essentiality that comes with a soul, you know? Or like
Essentiality?
essentiality. That there's like we were talking about earlier, there has to be some sort of like identity attached to it on a fundamental level. Whereas you could accept that there's these like very amorphous open system things that flow back and forth, and that's just all it is. And when we make distinctions, we're just making them arbitrarily. And then there's no essentiality to it.
But is this like a chaos and order thing?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're saying that chaos exists? Or
Well-
could exist?
Well, that there is a balance between chaos and order. But the thing that makes something essential is like the idea that it's eternal and it's special and it's identifiable, right? Where it's like, if you're saying like, well, after you die, there's still this soul left over, but it's not attached to any of these things that are inside of this open system, then it becomes like, okay, well, why is it associated with that system? How does it interact with this changing nature of the system? Like, why can't the system just be itself? Why does it need to have this other thing that's sort of with it, you know? And like the idea of like it needing to be more real in some sense than everything else. Like the soul's more real than the body under a lot of conceptions, right?
Yeah, because he's saying that that's the kind of eternal part, even though it's always changing.
Right.
But I think it's like, it is kind of like a fractal nature where like almost any of these rules that apply to this level apply to that level in some sense. And as you were saying, even with like, you know, you are to, you know, microorganism in your gut is, you know, like the earth is to you. Like there's all these levels where these kind of same principles seem to apply.
Yeah. And it's like saying, to jump off that, like if the earth were to eventually get sucked into the sun, then asking like, well, where did the earthness go? It seems to just be a question that it's like, you don't need to answer that question because the earthness was just a factor of it being earth. And once it got sucked into the sun, it wasn't earth anymore. So there is no earthness floating around as a ghost, right?
But how are you connecting that earthness idea to what Seth is saying?
Well, because that's what the soul is, right? The earthness is just the same thing as the Joe-ness of this, you know, collection of microorganisms and gut flora and stuff, right? Like
Right, but then he also says that like you are not consumed by your entity. You retain this individuality forever, like regardless of what happens. And I would argue to say that when the Earth gets sucked into the sun, that new planet, like astrological mass or whatever you would call that huge piece of rock in space, still has an earthness about it because it has characteristics of the sun and of the Earth now. Like the Earth will physically, with all its elements in it, will change that new planetary mass.
But that's true of me too, right? Where like you could say that I just retain all the dinosaur soul from all the dinosaur pee I drink, right?
I mean, this feels a little bit like a physical world angle to it. You know, like Seth's coming from this place where he's claiming to perceive that the soul is this thing that precedes and survives like physical life. It was there before and it will be there after.
Yeah. And then the difficulty with that is then being like, well, why is there this like open system nature to it then? You know, like, why do I need to have a conflict between my consciousness and the consciousness of the cells? Like, why would it be structured that way?
Where's the term conflict coming in?
Well, because it's like you were talking about before, if you want to run one way, but your skin cell wants to run the other way, you know?
Yeah, that's where, because of probabilities, there isn't conflict in that sense.
But the conflict's what implies the probability, right? Like we're deriving one idea from the other.
I mean, I'm not getting caught up in like what the order of things has to be or like how it's set up that way. Like I see how like if you're skeptical of this idea and then like these layers, additional layers of these ideas come in and they seem like just ways of like justifying or explaining things.
Right, yeah. Because that's like how you do, like in a larger sense, that seems to me how you should do metaphysics, right? You're like, there's a thing outside what I can experimentally test, but I know things about the world. How can I extend the things I know about the world to encompass this new knowledge with the things I do know, you know? Like, if I know that when I measure things and do math with them, I always get the same answers, then I know that in some sense there's this truth about mathematical knowledge, that like it is just kind of true in general in a timeless sense, which is kind of weird from a physicalist point of view, but you can show it and you can extend the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, to be able to say these other things, it's like, well, how can I extend my knowledge to justify them, you know? And I'm just saying there's sort of like a weird contradiction here with like the open nature of a system and also the like very discrete essential nature of a soul.
Yeah. And I think he's only going to like hammer that even more. Like he always stresses individuality. And I brought up, the most general dichotomy there of chaos and order. And I think, I don't know if Seth says this explicitly, but I kind of get that this is where he goes, that there actually isn't chaos anywhere in the universe. Like everything is consciousness, it's intentional action, it is order. And I think our own experience of chaos and order like points to this. Like for our limited selves, like when we experience chaos, it's just something that we haven't been able to order yet. We haven't been able to look at it in the way that orders it, that we can call it order.
I mean, this gets further away from the chapter, I guess, but like, how can the probabilities be an answer if there's not chaos? Because isn't chaos just indecidability that then probability is like a representation of? Like, if there's no chaos, how can there be probability?
I don't think of them as the same.
Yeah, I would, just based on what he said elsewhere, you have a probability branch off when consciousness or some conscious energy decides that they want to experience two different things.
Yeah.
Sentience, I would say, is the least chaotic thing in the universe.
So, I mean, it requires intention, decision, and order in that sense.
And desire.
But like when we talk about probability, right? Like we're saying that like if I roll a die, there's like 6 possible options, right?
Mm-hmm.
That could happen in the future. And the chaotic thing about that system is that while it's moving, there's no fundamental way for me to know what one of those options will actually be the case, right? Like that's what's chaotic about it, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think that's like a game that we're playing, right? Because you could like teach yourself to like spin it 14 times and let it drop on the one every time.
Yeah, but that's the thing with quantum physics, right? Is that like there isn't predictable physical systems. Like fundamentally, the universe isn't made predictable.
But I think that speaks to our powers of predicting more than it does like the existence of chaos or order, I think.
Or like, sure, in another sense, maybe you could say like, you could construct like a macro scale system that has so much noise in it that if you were to be able to differentiate the noise, you'd be able to predict the outcome. But because the noise exists, it's functionally like unpredictable, right?
To me, like the most inarguable, rock solid argument against the idea of chaos or randomness is the fact that I can't get my playlist to play an actual random.
Right.
Like it's the same songs. I have like 2,000 songs in this one playlist.
Well, that's not true chaos. That's randomness, and those are completely distinct things. Because the playlist runs off of a random number generator somewhere in the code, which is decidedly not chaotic.
Right.
The software is making it.
Okay, so maybe you can disentangle this then. Like, what's the difference between like randomness and chaos?
I was gonna ask the same thing.
Yeah.
Theoretically, I'm with you. I don't think chaos actually does exist in our universe, like at all. So when I'm talking about it, it's just a hypothetical, like a theoretical idea.
Right.
But that's like things are truly undecided.
Right.
From a cause and effect perspective. But a random number generator, and what we experience in video games, is not random.
It's random, right?
It's just math. It's just really obfuscated math where it's just
because we're running it off of an algorithmic machine. It couldn't be random.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I remember going to a skeptics meetup and just challenging some of those people to like point to anything in the universe that's random, that they know is random.
I mean, isn't the classic example the decay of a radioactive particle?
I think if we had the ability to look in there and see what was actually happening, and under the rules of this reality, energy is not created or destroyed. It has to go somewhere. If you're actually looking at where the energy in like the subatomic particles are going, you're going to see why things happen in a certain way.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to our times, because at any particular time in our history, there's a threshold where we can point to this thing. We don't understand this, therefore it's chaos. But that that's maybe where we're at currently with our threshold of understanding. It kind of goes there. It's not quite there. We don't fully understand that. I don't know if I could personally accept that as evidence.
I think it's the opposite, where like usually when people have theories of the fundamental nature of reality, it's orderly. And then they get angry when they find something that doesn't work. Like Einstein was really pissed that they did all the experiments that showed, all the like weird stuff that happens in quantum physics. Because he was like, look, there's obviously these hidden variables going on. Like God doesn't play dice with the universe.
But what I'm speaking to is like we have those experiences where it defies our theories, and then we develop a larger theory that encompasses those, and then it seems orderly again. And there's order there. What's limited is our ability to understand the order and, or predict it. And there's just always going to be limits to that. Like I get a chuckle about like the advance of technology, and I feel like weather prediction is like as poor as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Not as poor as it's ever been, but it hasn't improved in at least my lifetime.
Right. Yeah. Because the scale of the question is just so much larger than our capacity to understand it. Right.
Last night I went to Art Whirl. Even though like every year I go on Art Whirl, it rains. I looked at my weather app. It says clear skies all evening, and it poured the whole time.
Right.
Did I just refute my own argument?
I think you did. Yeah.
Is that randomness?
Yeah, there you go.
Oh shit.
So I really like this paragraph on the top of 78. It says,
Wow.
Now these abilities operate whether you know it or not, but often they operate in spite of you rather than with your conscious cooperation. And often when you do find yourself using them, you become frightened, disoriented, or confused. No matter what you've been taught, you must understand, for example, that basically speaking, perceptions are not physical in the way the term is usually used. If you catch yourself perceiving information through other than your physical senses, then you must accept the fact that this is the way perception works.
Are you taking issue with that last sentence?
No, I really like the last sentence.
Okay.
Because that's like, if you're starting from like, what's it called? What's the word? When you're talking about like your own experience as the world like appears to you.
Like solipsism?
Not solipsistic.
Just your own context or perception, or
from like an existentialist like starting point, right? Like the first thing that exists is like you, the experiencer. And like whatever perceptions appear to you have to be considered valid to your analysis.
Yeah.
And it's like whether or not you can attribute them to senses, to your physical senses, they are perceptions that need to be accounted for.
Yeah.
That's what, like that book I was talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Like the book you were talking about with like the fear, where it's like, this fear is real. It is in your environment, like your emotional, psychological environment. You need to account for it.
Right.
Like otherwise, why would it be there?
I don't know where Seth brings in the term official line of consciousness, but this is kind of what he's referring to, is like we're disregarding part of our own experience because it doesn't fit in that definition, the official line of consciousness.
Right.
That makes me think of his explanation of, and I think I brought this up already on the podcast, but Rob was like really feeling like the burdens of the world, like being at war and, starvation and suffering. And Seth was pointing to Rob's individual experience. Like, you have to take this as primary. Like, you're not experiencing these things. And he used an example of someone being on like an ocean liner, and they can see the waves, and they're just like so obsessed with like the danger of those waves, but they're not realizing their own experience. They're on this like safe and stable thing. Like he's not saying you should disregard like the suffering in the world, but like he's saying that you can't disregard your primary experience.
Yeah. And
a lot of people do that when they're going overboard with like feeling the burdens of the world.
Especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Like
easy to do.
There's a lot of catastrophes happening in the world, and we are all on social media all the time.
The news is generally the bad news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is like a psychological health aspect of being able to be like, look, you don't have a responsibility to tune in all the time.
Yeah.
Like you can just be like, I'm good. I live a comfortable life. I'm just going to go for a walk with my dog or something,
Yeah. And hearing that, like my own personal struggles with those ideas, or Seth, or if you want to call it a justification, it seemed kind of like cheating until I kind of realized that like this place is, in the same way we're talking about this complexity of like subconsciousnesses and identities with our own selves, like the world is that. There's all these different people coming in. We have like collective challenges. So like our challenges or what we're doing here also have these fuzzy Venn diagram borders or non-borders, like we're all here to like figure out how to not kill each other in war. But to some extent, the people fighting war are taking on a different level of that challenge than we are sitting in this room talking about reality, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the world is this place where all these different challenges fit together, So
Yeah.
Seth talks about like you'll never get past war by hating war, only by loving peace will you get beyond it.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I think he would also remind you that you were also a soldier at some point,
So-
and you might even be that soldier right now
Yeah.
across the world
Oh, yeah.
as another manifestation of your entity.
Is that a thing that's allowed for in this like view, that like you could be like multiple people
Mhm.
that like interact with each other?
Yeah.
Whoa.
So those are called counterparts, and according to Seth, like during the same time period, right?
I get really confused about counterparts, because I think he meant that counterparts are not actually your entity, because he talks about counterparts of people in the classes, like physically in Jane's house,
Yeah.
and they were not part of the same entity, because he refers to them by their entity name, which are different. But like, for what you're asking, can you reincarnationally be multiple people at the same time? Yes,
Whoa.
which is trippy.
That is trippy.
But it's like what you guys were saying. You get what you focus upon. So in this life, you're supposed to be focusing on like what you're currently experiencing, not the war on the other side of the world, what you may be focusing on in another life.
Well, and I mean, if you really are drawn to being sympathetic with people who are in another part of the world suffering, like that could be your path in life, but you just have to realize and commit to like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go to school to study, agriculture, and then I'm going to fly to this war-torn country and I'm going to help them like reestablish like, these villages that have been like destroyed or whatever. And it's like that, if you make that your life goal, maybe that is your purpose. It's just like focusing on what your actual lived experience is in one way or another, rather than focusing on, what's the word? Vicariously going through other people.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Like it's your choice. You can do whatever you want, but you should choose instead of sitting there thinking, oh, everything happens to me. It's not my choice.
Right, exactly.
That's a good point, because there's for sure those people where they're meant to, and all of us are meant to have an awareness of these things, but like he's just pointing to the fact that our culture is set up that we kind of overwhelm ourselves and paralyze ourselves, and it affects it colors our view of what the world is. We become totally cynical, and our cynicism like gets into that vicious cycle where it breeds even more. Like we can justify our own greed because the world's just a hellish place anyway, so I'm going to take from my neighbor, like he's pointing out these negative aspects of like getting caught up in
the negative, like, psychological space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been easy to see, like, especially in these last 5 years, I think, in this part of the world where there's a lot of people that have pretty good lives here.
Yeah, the water war hasn't started, for the listener.
Right. But like
The United States of America is pretty chiller.
COVID happens and George Floyd happened, and there's a lot of people. This is just a big mishmash of all these energies, and you can see, I've seen all sorts of variations of people that have like legitimate gripes with systemic things, and other people that don't, but like legitimately take them on, or illegitimately, or like I just having familiarity with this material and like just viewing the world and all these things happening has just been really eye-opening for me.
Yeah. I think it's remarkable too that like my experience, at least, seems to indicate that people who have a lot of suffering in their life end up being usually very optimistic people,
Yeah.
There's like a strength of optimism that comes from having difficult experience.
Certain people, right?
I mean, I feel like it's more often than not,
Yeah.
Or like it's very easy to be doom and gloom when you're like watching something happen to somebody else and you're just like, why is the world like this? But like if you struggle through real problems, it's like to be able to get through it and like have a life after. Sort of, it seems like psychologically, you almost need to have this very like optimistic view of the world where there is like this sort of growth that is possible. And you can acknowledge the badness of everything, but you can also acknowledge like you're saying, like you need to focus on your life and the good things that are in it and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It makes me think of I have a coworker friend that grew up in El Salvador until he was 13, but like him and his brothers had to like every day going to school, they had to like hide and run and sneak so they didn't get like kidnapped and thrown into a child army.
Right.
And then like, he moves to Florida and joins the US Army in order not to like get deported, and then like almost does anyways, but then, like it all works out, but like, and then now he's raising a family in Minnesota and like just like had every right to like say that the world wasn't treating him fairly and throw up his hands and just persevered and became this just amazing person.
Right, because the acknowledgement that the world's treating you unfairly is like a first step. It's not the end state,
Yeah.
It's like it's treating you unfairly, so what are you going to do?
Yeah. But I mean, I've been able to like just juxtapose that attitude with like so many people that have had, by those same standards, like an amazingly privileged life. And then somehow they're looking at the world in an entirely different way. They're not like taking every opportunity. They're just lamenting how things suck,
Yeah.
And I think Seth would say like both of those struggles are valid. Like we want to like make one the bad guy and one the good guy, but like I think that's where he is stressing individuality. Like this is just a place where that person is. That's their challenges. They're dealing with those. We shouldn't judge that.
That reminds me of something he said, and I don't remember where, but he was like, for every person who's like eating a steak in a first world country like America, they have another reincarnation of life where they're starving in some other country.
Yeah, and if you look at it in the sense where they're connected to that like negative feeling, they almost feel like they have to eat the steak. Like this is their opportunity. Like if they don't eat it now, they're not going to get it. Like
it's like how the karma belief like reinforces the caste system.
Yeah.
Because if you're a Brahmin, you're like, well, I was like a lower caste before, so I deserve this.
Yeah.
Like I deserve to be a king.
That line where like I had an ex-partner say this to me, like, I did the work. Like she was saying that like she in this context that she was a finished product. Like, and I feel like that's kind of like the Brahmin kind of attitude, like where like I did the work.
Right. I wasn't untouchable before.
Yeah.
That's why
I was at your caste, and now that's I'm up here and I've earned this.
Yeah.
It's funny.
And it's almost their obligation to enforce it on other people.
This was good for me and it'll be good for you.
Yeah. Except instead of being like I don't know. Does Hindu reincarnation also allow for like simultaneous reincarnations or no?
I don't believe so. I feel like most of our earthly conceptions are caught up in just linear time.
So like in the Sethian one, you can be both the master and the slave at the same time, in a certain sense.
I think, sorry.
I was just saying in a larger sense that it's all simultaneous, but like even in our terms, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he does say all your lives are simultaneous, but it just reminded me of how Jane and Rob asked him once, do you have any physical incarnations on Earth right now? And he was like, I have a dog. But he wouldn't tell them where for some reason. And they asked about the dog like some years later, and he was like, let me check. Oh no, that dog's gone. I'm like, okay, can you not leave us hanging? Like, tell us.
That's funny.
He's like, now the dog died.
Did he really say like, let me check?
That was the impression that I got, that he was like, oh no, it's dead. And not like, oh no, the thing's gone.
Because he's like connected with it, but he's not necessarily focused on whether it's like physically alive or in some sense maybe.
Well, because he has to like go all the way up to the entity level and come all the way down in the back.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's even in a timeless zone, there's a little bit of lag there.
Oh, wait a minute. It actually shows up later in this book.
Does it?
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right, stay tuned.
To Seth dog.
I was watching your face, Joe. You just lit up when she talked about that.
I love the lore. It's so fun.
Yeah. Even again, it was like some intentional reason for doing it, right? Like he was getting something out of it.
He did say that sometimes as a break, as a break, entities might choose to spend centuries as a tree.
Yeah, we
Oh, yeah.
covered that in probably chapter 2 or 3, maybe.
That would be a really nice break, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Be a
Depending on
tree.
where the tree is. Not as you can.
Chilling.
I just saw an article in the newspaper about what they believe is the oldest tree in Minnesota, and I think it's 1,100 years old.
Whoa.
But they don't know because the inner core is rotted out, so it's like hollow. So there's like this blank space in the record.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's actually really...
Never occurred to me, but yeah, it's cool.
Even tree history can get erased.
Take a 1,100-year nap as a tree.
Maybe you are right now. Maybe that's you, Michael.
Yeah. What does it mean that my core is gone?
Yeah. It's a Michael-shaped hole in the middle of the tree.
Yeah.
And then we talk about 78. We start talking here about perception a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Seth starts talking a little bit about ESP, but doesn't really get into it.
He says that now it is nearly impossible to separate a discussion of the nature of the soul from a discussion of the nature of perception.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Well, this gets back to like, this is still kind of an open-ended question, but like where he said that consciousness isn't everything, right? Didn't we get hung up on that a few weeks ago? Like we saying that consciousness is something that the soul uses as we use our eyes, but he's implying that there's something that isn't consciousness. I'm not sure what that is yet, and I don't know. I can't imagine what it would be. But to answer your question, that's how I would answer it, like, because perception, in some sense, there is no difference because we are just the totality of our experience, and that's just perception.
Yeah, it's like sense data flows the opposite way of what we think it does. Where instead of like my eyes receive photons into them to tell me what's out there, my eyes project the things I see out into the world and make them real. Or not my eyes, but like my sense of sight.
Yeah, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah. So like when you touch a hot stove, you are making it hot by touching it.
It's kind of a trip. That sounds like a Zen koan or something.
Yeah.
At some place I should try to find the quote, but he trying to redefine the borders of the self, but he talks about like the extent of our visual field as our visual body. Or I don't know if he uses that term, but something like that. But basically saying that like it's kind of silly for us to like define ourselves at the boundary of our skin, basically. That like our perceptions are connecting us farther, even in our own limited physical terms.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Like, what are we outside of our experience?
I don't have anything for 79 until the bare bottom.
This kind of just says a little bit more of what I was just saying. There are no real divisions between the perceiver and the thing seemingly perceived. In many ways, the thing perceived is an extension of the perceiver. This may seem strange, but all acts are mental, or if you prefer, psychic acts. This is an extremely simple explanation, but the thought creates the reality. Then the creator of the thought perceives the object, and he does not understand the connection between him and this seemingly separate thing. You can see like how the different levels of the self are like playing different roles here. Like the inner self is using the energy from the entity or the soul to like create the world, and the outer self or the outer ego is the part that's kind of accepting the rules of the game. It's pretending, it's forgetting. It's just taking in physical perception.
Yeah.
And that's where this new experience is created.
And presumably the object of the senses is as much a part of the entity as the ego is. It's just it doesn't have sense data going to the ego. I guess it does have sense data going to the ego because the sense data is equally a part of the object and the ego, right? Yeah. So like, if I'm observing the chair, what's actually happening is there's a higher level ego that is making both me and the chair. And my act of observing the chair is exactly the same as the chair's act of like reverse observing, like observing prime or observing star meet, where the relation can go both ways since it comes from the same thing.
Yeah. I don't know if it's like that's exactly right, but it's really interesting.
That's not how I would interpret it, because I don't think the chair would be a part of you. I don't think the chair would be part of something that we would deem as an entity.
But doesn't it get created by the entity?
Yes. But
But
was your pee, is that part of your entity too?
I mean, it was. When it was in my bladder, it was.
the part I'm not sure about is like the chair perceiving you back, like, because it's all the experience is just one thing.
It's like if you imagine an arrow pointing from me to the chair, you could say from the chair's perspective, there are these things that are like arrows, except that the point comes from it and the end goes towards me. The relation is one way, but because both parts of the relation are equally created by the same higher thing, it would almost be equally right to say that you could talk about this entire picture from a chair perspective rather than from a person perspective, you know?
I think that's helping like illuminate what's happening without being exactly right.
Okay.
I think. Like earlier when you're talking about Gaia, like I think somewhere Seth says that like humans are kind of like the thinking part of the earth, you know? So like that's making me think like in this chair person example, like we're setting up the game in a way that like I as the person have these abilities and I'm kind of this like point of perception, but like it gets interesting when we're talking about other entities, like we brought up like the spider in the corner, or this is the age-old philosophical question, like if a tree falls in a forest and no one's there to hear, it doesn't make a sound. And I think the Schopenhauerian answer and the Sethian answer are kind of similar. We're like, yes, because like matter is created from consciousness.
Right, but some parts of that consciousness are enveloped into entities, right? And like you said before, remember when we were talking about how like in this room there's supposed to be like 3 different chairs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One for each of the observers?
Yeah.
So wouldn't each one of those be attached to one of us? Or one of our entities?
Yeah, like on these various levels of the self.
Yeah.
It's challenging, right?
Unless we're all one super entity, and then there'd only be one chair being perceived 3 times.
Yeah, but does that even change anything? Is it still perceived?
Right, yeah, no, being perceived is the same as being created physically. So anything that's perceived is already, it's got its own thing.
I mean, we're just kind of like drawing lines and experience and these arbitrary lines.
Well, but it matters though, right? Because you said like the human part is the thinking part, but the chair part is presumably not.
Yeah, and it also matters because creativity is coming from this act of dividing things, this act of pluralization or taking on limitation. It becomes a new experience by like shutting out other things, you know, by your entity becoming the limited physical perceiving person that's Joe. Like you getting this new experience by just taking on this narrow, acute view of reality.
Yeah, it's like I'm grabbing a doll that's shaped like Joe, and I'm grabbing a little chair, and I'm going, and I'm sticking the Joe doll on the chair, and I'm going.
That's actually kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
Because kids do that all the time.
Yeah.
And they love doing it.
They love doing it. And it's very imaginatively creative for them. Like for them, it's very vivid that they're creating this whole world, you know?
I just like that maybe it's like endearing at every level, the way we like look at children or like it warms our heart to see them play. And there's like some higher part of our consciousness, like, look at these little guys are in their room with their headsets on.
Yeah, right.
Playing podcasts.
You know, that reminds me of Joe.
Oh.
Like, I don't know, you might know this too, like playing The Sims, where you are this human, above you is an entity, but below you are like all 8 of your Sims, and you're just having them play out their lives, pretend, and then in the later Sims games, you can make your Sims play The Sims.
Yeah.
Sims all the way
It's
down.
just Sims all the way
Yeah.
down. Yeah, I got a swat for the little gem above my head.
Oh, yeah. It's cool how it just like these ideas do like point us to like how there are kind of the ideas exist in our culture. We've been talking about it repeatedly with like games and movies and trees and families and
Yeah.
yeah.
And he did say concepts will appear in popular culture before you discover them as a valid thing. I think that might be why there are so many movies now about multiverse and thoughts creating reality.
And it definitely resonates. I mean,
Oh, people love that stuff.
people love it.
People love it. All the Marvel stuff, dude, it's all multiverse stuff.
Yeah. Rick and Morty.
Yeah. I liked at the bottom of 79 when Seth is flirting with Rob. That was really endearing to me. It says Jane, as Seth, leaned forward smiling. Do you grow weary? I could use a break, a short one. Still entranced and quite amused, Jane continued to stare at me. Her eyes were very dark. I'm okay, I said. Do you want to continue? I'm all right. And then Seth says, I would not have it on my conscience. Now what we need is an extra set of fingers for you. But by all means, take your break. Humorously, I do not mean to keep you over long. It's all right. Suddenly loud and very powerful. I could dictate all night, one night, and then you could take 3 sessions off. And then Rob says, I believe you could.
I think it's so funny that Seth is like being really playful and Rob is just like really stiff in business.
Yeah. It's so cute.
I feel like I would struggle taking down dictation. Like, just, you'd feel a responsibility to be very accurate, and take it down as well as you could. And
And then every once in a while, your wife just starts fucking with you.
she's manipulating you with her end.
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fun good evening.